Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of History and Truth. Today we are at the Changi Chapel and Museum in Singapore with our lovely guide. Decades have passed since the turmoil of World War II. Changi today may be very different from its former life as a prisoner of war camp for Allied soldiers and civilians during the Japanese occupation. But its stories and lessons endure. The Changi Chapel and Museum remembers those who perished during internment and pays tribute to the courage and resilience of the many men, women, and children interned in Changi who lived through and overcame a dark period in Singapore's history. Today we're speaking about the Kempetai. The Kempetai Military Police Corps was the military police arm of the Imperial Japanese Army from 1881 to 1945. It was both a conventional military police and a secret police force. In Japanese-occupied territories, the Kempetai also arrested or killed those who were suspected of being anti-Japanese. While it was institutionally part of the Army, the Kempetai also discharged the functions of the military police for the Imperial Japanese Navy under the direction of the Admiralty Minister, although the IJN had its own much smaller Tokitai. Those of the executive police under the direction of the Home Minister and those of the judicial police under the direction of Justice Minister, a member of the Corps was called a Kempai. History. Kempetai was established in 1881 by a decree called the Kempai Ordinance, figuratively, articles concerning gendarmes. Its model was the National Gendarmerie of France. Details of the Kempetai's military, executive, and judicial police functions were defined by the Kempai Rei of 1898, which was amended 26 times before Japan's defeat in August 1945. The force consisted of 349 men. The enforcement of the new conscription legislation was an important part of their duty due to resistance from peasant families. The Kempetai's General Affairs branch was in charge of the force's policy, personnel management, internal discipline, as well as the communication with the ministries of the Admiralty, the Interior, and Justice. The Operation Branch was in charge of the distribution of military police units within the Army, General Public Security, and Intelligence. In 1907, the Kempetai was ordered to Korea, where its main duty was defined as preserving the peace, although it also functioned as a military police for the Japanese Army stationed there. This status remained basically unchanged after Japan's annexation of Korea in 1910. Kempetai maintained public order within Japan under the direction of the Interior Minister, and in the occupied territories under the direction of the Minister of War. Japan also had a civilian secret police force, the TOKO, which was the Japanese acronym of Tokubetsu Koto Keisatsu, Special Higher Police, part of the Interior Ministry. However, the Kempetai had a TOKO branch of its own, and through it discharged the functions of a secret police. When the Kempetai arrested a civilian under the direction of the Justice Minister, the arrested person was nominally subject to civilian judicial proceedings. The Kempetai's brutality was particularly notorious in Korea and the other occupied territories. The Kempetai were also aboard in Japan's mainland as well, especially during World War II, when Prime Minister Hideki Tojo, formerly the commander of the Kempetai of the Japanese Army in Manchuria from 1935 to 1937, used the Kempetai extensively to make sure that everyone was loyal to the war. According to United States Army TME 30-480, there were over 36,000 regular members of the Kempetai at the end of the war. This did not include the many ethnic auxiliaries. As many foreign Kempetai fell under the Japanese military occupation during the 1930s and the early 1940s, the Kempetai recruited a large number of locals in those territories. Taiwanese and Koreans were used extensively as auxiliaries to police the newly occupied territories in Southeast Asia. although the Kempetai recruited French Indochinese, especially from among Cao Dai religious sect, Malays, and others. Kempetai may have trained Trinh Minh Te, a Vietnamese nationalist and military leader. Kempetai was disarmed and disbanded after the Japanese surrendered in August 1945. Today, the post-war self-defense forces internal police is called Kempetai. Each individual member is called a Kemukan, the Axis powers. In the 1920s and 1930s, the Kempetai forged various connections with certain pre-war European intelligence services. Later, when Japan signed the Tripartite Pact, Japan formed formal links with the intelligence units now under German and Italian practice, known as the German Abwehr and the Italian Servizio Informazione Militare. The Army and the Navy of Japan contacted their corresponding Wehrmacht intelligence units, Schutzstaffel SS or Kriegsmarine, about information on Europe and vice versa. Europe and Japan realized the benefits of the exchanges. For example, the Japanese sent data about Soviet forces in the Far East and in Operation Barbarossa from the Japanese embassy. Admiral Canaris offered aid in respect to the neutrality of Portugal in Timor. One important contact point was at the Penang submarine base in occupied British Malaya. The base served Axis submarine forces, Italian Regia Marina, German Kriegsmarine, and the Dai Nippon Teiko Kaiku, the Imperial Japanese Navy. At regular intervals, technological and information exchanges occurred there. While these were available to them, Axis forces used the bases in Italian East Africa, the Vichy France colony of Madagascar, and some officially neutral places like Portuguese India. Human rights abuses. The Kempetai ran extensive criminal and collaborationist networks, extorting vast amounts of money from businesses and civilians wherever they operated. They also ran the Allied prisoner of war system, which often treated captives with extreme brutality. Many of the abuses were documented in Japanese war crimes trials, such as those committed by the Kempetai East District Branch in Singapore. The Kempetai also carried out revenge attacks against prisoners and civilians. For example, after Colonel Doolittle's raid on Tokyo in 1942, the Kempetai carried out reprisals against thousands of Chinese civilians and captured airmen. Or, in 1943, the Double Tent Massacre, which was in response to an Allied raid on Singapore Harbor. All these actions together, including Unit 731's vivisection campaign, have become infamous. Organization. The Kempetai maintained a headquarters in each relevant area army, commanded by a Shosho, a major general, and a Taisa, colonel, as executive officer and comprising 2 or 3 field offices, commanded by a Chusa, lieutenant colonel, and with a Shosa, major, as executive officer, and each with approximately 375 personnel. The field office, in turn, was divided into 65-men sections called Buntai. Each was commanded by a Tai E, captain, and a Chu I, first lieutenant, and as executive officer, and had 65 other troops. The Buntai was further divided into detachments called Bunkentai, commanded by a Sho I, a second lieutenant, with a Junshikan, warrant officer, an executive officer, and 20 other troops. Each detachment contained 3 squads: police squad, or Kinuhan, an administration squad, or Naikinhan, and a special duty squad, or Tokumu Han. Kempetai auxiliary units consisting of regional ethnic forces were organized in occupied areas. These troops supplemented the Kempetai and were considered part of the organization, but were limited to the rank of Shocho, Sergeant Major. In 1937, the Kempetai had 315 officers and 6,000 enlisted. These were the members of the known public forces. The Allies estimated that by the end of World War II, there were at least 7,500 members of the Kempetai. Active units. Kempetai operated commands on the Japanese mainland and throughout all occupied and captured overseas territories during the Pacific War. The external units operated outside Japan were 1st Field Kempetai, commanded by Major General Koichi Ono from August 1941 to 23rd February 1942. 2nd Field Kempetai, attached to the 25th Army and based in Singapore from 1942. This unit was under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Oishi Masayuki. In January 1944, Malaya came under 3rd Field Kempetai, Major General Masanori Kojima. The 3rd Field Kempetai was drawn from a Manchurian Kempai training regiment in July 1941 and then attached to the 16th Army and based in Java and Sumatra from 1942. The unit's headquarters was in Batavia under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Kuzumi Kenzaburo. By war's end, there were 772 members of the unit. There was a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th Field Kempetai. The wartime mission for the Kempetai was responsible for the following: travel permits, labor recruitment, counterintelligence and counter-propaganda, run by the Toko Kempetai or anti-ideological work, supply requisitioning and rationing, psychological operations and propaganda, and rear area security. By 1944, despite the obvious tide of war, the Kempetai were arresting people for anti-war sentiment and defeatism. Uniform. Personnel wore either the standard M1938 field uniform or the cavalry uniform with high black leather boots. Civilian clothes were also authorized, but badges of rank of Japanese Imperial Chrysanthemums were worn under the jacket label, under the jacket lapel. Uniformed personnel also wore a black chevron on their uniforms and a white armband on the left arm with the characters Ken, law, and Pei, soldier. Together read as Kempei or Kempai, which translates to military policeman. A full dress uniform comprising red kepe, gold and red waist band, dark blue tunic, and trousers with black facings was authorized for officers of the Kempetai to wear on ceremonial occasions until 1942. Rank insignia comprised gold Austrian knots and epaulets. Personnel were armed with either a cavalry saber and pistol for officers and a pistol and bayonet for enlisted men. Junior NCOs carried a shinai, or bamboo kendo sword, especially when dealing with prisoners.